Yes.
All right, there it is. All right.
I see it on my computer.
Yeah. See it on mine too.
All right. I'm just waiting for it to come up. All righty. There it is. And then I'll do the share to the Facebook page.
And we will be available.
And we'll be ready to go. Yes. As soon as it tells me which, I have all these pages. All right. There we go. I think we're ready to go. Good afternoon, all, and welcome to our Faith Leaders Zoom call. I'm Reverend Dr. Mariah McIntosh, the Associate Director, and I'm competing with the loudspeaker in the airport. I've got my buds in. I don't know whether y'all can hear them or not, but they're trying to announce people to get on these planes. I am at the Sanford, Florida airport, waiting for my flight to get out of here before Ian comes. So y'all pray I can get on that plane and make my way back to Columbus this evening. We're going to ask if Dr. Jack Sullivan Jr., our Executive Director, if he would please open us up with a word of prayer, and then we'll continue on.
Sure. Once more, hello, everyone. We're glad you're on with us today. Thanks, Dr. McIntosh, for being on location to get us going this afternoon. And now let us pray. Oh, God of love, God of peace, God of justice, we praise you for the ways you have committed yourself to human flourishing, that all may have access to the resources that they need to be fully alive and fully participating in the realms of this world, even working to shape them toward peace and towards justice and human wholeness, that all may flourish. We thank you, O God, for this opportunity we have once more to come together and consider all of your vision that we can grasp for human flourishing and for our voices to be heard in the political process. We ask your blessings on those who will give us guidance and leadership today concerning how rights may be protected and enhanced and how voters may be supported as they go their way to making their voices heard in ways that will create policies for the good of our nation. Bless our time together, we pray. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Today, I have a longtime friend and colleague with me from Youngstown, Ohio. In her earlier years, she was an active union organizer and activist. Even though she officially retired, she hasn't stopped the work. She is from Youngstown, Ohio. This is Jelana Aslam. And when I served in Youngstown, Ohio, I learned that I pastored the church that her family had been members of when she was a young lady. But we've worked together in Youngstown, and now we have been put back together on a major project for the state of Ohio called the Faiths United to Save Democracy. It is a nationwide group. Ben, I think you've been a part of that, haven't you? You joined that group?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I know Dan Clark, who is a good colleague of ours with Faith in Public Life, is a part of it. It's an interfaith group that does exactly what it says. We are under the understanding that democracy and our lives as citizens in this country is not just limited to the politicians and the community leaders, but even the faith community has a vested interest. We have the First Amendment that guarantees us the freedom of religion. For some people, it may be the freedom from religion, in that we can't force people to worship. We don't have a national or a state God, even though we see that there are factions in our nation that are trying to take us there. And so Gelada is the state lead for Ohio. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to start us off by sharing the screen and give you a little bit of information about the Faiths United to Save Democracy. And then I will turn it over to Gelada as she engages us in conversation about our whole chaplain campaign. We know that there are some other organizations in the state that are working with poll protectors. And again, our main goal is to make sure that everybody gets to vote and vote safely. So let me share my screen here and start off with the PowerPoint presentation. This is our group that the Ohio Council of Churches has collaborated with, Faiths United to Save Democracy. This is the voter toolkit. We are in collaboration with the Skinner Leadership Institute, Sojourners, and the Center for Faith and Justice at Georgetown University. All right, so our core team members, as you see to your right, are Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, who is kind of spearheading all of this. She is the executive director of the Skinner Leadership Institute. She is joined by Reverend Jim Wallace, the former head of Sojourners, Reverend Adam Taylor, the current head of Sojourners, and Reverend Terrence McKinley, who is one who helps get courses together and organized around issues of faith and justice. So as it says there on the screen, we are a nonpartisan, multiracial, multi-faith. So it's not just Christians only. We engage everybody. In fact, part of our state team, we have rabbis, we have imams, we've got everybody from all walks of faith, also multi-generational. It is a voter justice campaign, and you see the key states there. As you've read in the paper, we've seen what's been happening election-wise in some of these states. Ohio has not gotten that drastic yet, but if we're not careful, it could be. But Ohio has been targeted as one of the key states. Our campaign is to overcome the unprecedented assault on democracy, aimed at making it more difficult for people who are considered in the Christian sense the least of these, those living in poverty, vulnerable voters, those who most likely the laws that are coming out to suppress the vote. They say it's preventing voter fraud. We say it's just preventing people from voting, period. In the 2020 election, the Faiths United to Save Democracy organized what they called a turnout Sunday with lawyers and callers. The callers are the clergy, with the lawyers, that we put together a voter protection campaign project. And it helped us to be in spaces and places that would guarantee people's right to vote. And as we see that, as we turned out the vote in 2020, all it did was propel some states to come up with what's said in here, over 400 new voter restriction laws and proposals. We see what's happening in some states where the legislature may be of one party and the governor may be of another party, that those legislatures, especially those with supermajorities, have passed laws that inhibit and restrict the power of the governor as long as that governor is not of their party. Here is some of our national and state leads. You see some familiar faces for some of us there. Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, Reverend Lance Watson. We see the AMEs, Bishop Harry Seawright, the Disciples of Christ, Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Cynthia Hale, nationally known Dr. Frederick Haynes of Texas, and our own Miss Jelada Oslam, who represents Ohio. These are several of the denominations and organizations that are in support of the Faiths United to Save Democracy. See that some of our churches are listed here, as well as some other conferences and organizations. This is the spiritual mandate of the Faiths United to Save Democracy, that we are putting our faith into action to make sure that all of our citizens are treated rightly and fairly and get to have their voices heard, especially in the political arena. And if somebody would like a copy of this presentation, I'd be happy to send it to you. And so what we're going to be talking about primarily today is the campaign for the we're here to talk about the campaign, which is why we've got you here. We are soliciting poll chaplains. Poll chaplains who will dress in their clergy attire and be present at voting places, not inside, but at least outside, to make sure that people who come to vote are not intimidated, not threatened. I think in Ohio with Joan, was Van Clear? Yeah. Okay, just 1 second. All right. So what they've got, she told me I got to move outside. But what we've got, I think Joan Van Cleer and Dan are working with a Peacekeepers campaign. Peacekeepers and the poll chaplains are kind of working similarly to do the same thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Jelada, and I do have the presentation of the poll chaplains on a PowerPoint slide if you want me to share that, Ms. Jelada. So if you'll unmute and start talking, if you need me to share, I'll share.
Thank you, Dr. McIntosh. I hope that you will share.
Okay.
In case I forget anything as we go. And thank you so much to the faith leaders that are on this call and those that may be watching live via Facebook. This work, of course, we know how important this is, but one of the things that happened is Dr. Skinner, Dr. Otis Moss Jr., Reverend Jim Wallace, and several other people who have always been engaged in this kind of work and concerned about social justice work, really got together and said, you know, in 2018, they first started working together. 2020, it ramped up with Turnout Sunday Lawyers and Callers. And now, given the attacks we see on democracy across our nation, the idea is to have poll chaplains in the 10 states that have been targeted, unfortunately, by some folks who are active in the political arena. This is a nonpartisan effort, but as Reverend Jim Wallace loves to say, you know, this is moral calling. This is the need for faith leaders to be not just the peacekeepers, but to be the voices of reason, to be the voices of moral clarity when it comes to protecting people's right to vote, regardless of how they vote, whether we agree with the way they vote or not. The issue is that everyone, every man and woman, is entitled to one vote, and that should be done freely, and it should be done without intimidation. And unfortunately, one of the things that we found, that there is a massive campaign by some people who may not want us to vote to recruit and train 100,000 people across the United States of America to not just work at polling locations on the outside, but to work as poll workers inside for boards of elections, so they can challenge, intimidate, frustrate, and try to deter people from casting their vote. And so now more than ever, we need our faith leaders. We need the people who are, not afraid of anything, to be the voices of clarity, to keep the calm, and to be there for so many of those people in the community who really just need to have someone to look out for them. This can't just be a legal thing. This can't just be let's call the police thing. We know that the bottom line is that, most of us believe that, God is love, and good versus evil, good is going to win every time. I mean, that's just how it's meant to be. It doesn't mean there's not going to be trials, tribulations, and hassles. We know that, but we just believe that, this work is a moral calling, again, as Pastor Jim Wallace loves to say, because if we truly believe that God created man in his own image, then by abusing, intimidating, and refusing man the right to vote, then in effect, those individuals are saying that either men are not created in the image of God, or they don't think that the image of God is worth protecting. And so this is one of the reasons why this Faith United to Save Democracy has become so passionate about protecting voting rights. Dr. Mack, are you still around, or did she have to move?
I'm here.
Okay. I didn't know if you got a chance to pull
Yeah, I'm ready. I just had to switch positions, but I'm ready.
When you said, wait a minute, I said, okay, she probably had to move.
All right,
Yeah,
there it is.
That's the reason for it. And I say all the time when I'm speaking, I don't own a collar. I'm not clergy. I'm very clear what my assignment is. My assignment is to work to help my community, to help, the African-American community, the faith community, the labor community, working people, the best I can to be able to exercise their rights to vote. But this work is important. So this poll chaplain, there's a training manual. We are actually going to have training 4 weeks in October. Now, of course, in Ohio, we start early voting October the 12th. And so, there's going to be, I think, let me get this right. The dates for the training is, is it October the 11th?
I think so.
I think it's every Tuesday in October.
4th, 11th, and 18th.
4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th. But basically, if you want to go back, are you on a, okay. So the poll chaplain. Huh?
Also the 25th.
25th, yes. So every one of those. And again, now we have early voting starting. We definitely want to try to get poll chaplains for Election Day, which is November the 8th, Tuesday, November the 8th. But you know, depending on what we're hearing around the state, there may be a need to try to have chaplains out for early voting, at least the first couple of days, which is where the big turnout is, and then that last week. Because, you know, the last week of early voting are the extended hours. We have weekend voting, and particularly Sunday, there's souls to the polls votings the Sunday before election.
You too.
So that's really an issue. So are you moving the screen or?
I am now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so the overview we kind of talked about already. And because of the massive recruitment, you know, we really want to protect those folks in lower income polling sites, particularly those populated by Black and brown voters, but they're not all populated by Black and brown voters. You know, some of them, unfortunately, you know, poverty doesn't know a color. And unfortunately, we have communities of, you know, poor white communities that may be at risk as well. Go ahead, Dr. Mack. And so again, the preparation for the election, we're going to do we're asking everybody, if you know somebody within your organization, within your church, within your congregation, pastors, faith leaders, deacons, associate ministers, those folks who would be willing to be poll chaplains, we would love to have them. There's going to be the training session, basic and de-escalation. Then we would assign people to a polling site, and then of course the assignment and deployment on election day. It doesn't make sense to ask people to cover one site all day. We know election day is a long day. That's a 13-hour day. If we could get maybe a couple people, 2 or 3 people to cover those big polling locations where we think there are going to be problems. What we did in 2020 was there was a focus on what I call the 3 C's. Now, those of us in Ohio know that the focus always tends to be Cincy, Cleveland, and Columbus, which is fine because they're the bigger cities, but that's not where there's going to be massive movement, and that's not where poor people live. They only live in those 3 cities. And so Toledo and Youngstown and, you know, Lorraine, and, you know, there are other places, Dayton, where there may be some challenges. So we are not going to be just located in the 3 C's. We will also have a communication system set up so that people know how to, you know, report any problems. The poll chaplains, if they're having any issues, they know how to contact our voter protection hotline. And then afterwards, there'll be an evaluation after election day, data collection, reporting, and evaluation, basically just to see where the hot spots were, not only where we anticipated problems, but maybe where we didn't get any help. You know, maybe in some counties, there were some people that were less than friendly, you know, to address our needs. I have never really had that experience with the Board of Elections employees, but I have had that experience with some poll workers in my county. So just depending on what the situation is. And then of course, doesn't really say there on top of responsibilities, but so people know their rights. Because one of the things I find that happens all the time in all of my years being active in political engagement and election day activity is many times people don't know what their rights are. And so it's important for the poll chaplains to know, and it's important that they be able to give that information without having to call anyone. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we're going to give you, and it talks about the appendices, but the manual itself, we can share with you. If anyone is willing to be a part of this work, I would love to have you sign up for the training. You can go on the website as turnoutsunday.com. It's all one word. Turnoutsunday is one word, .com. And go down to it, and when you go on the website, it'll come up immediately. Face United to Save Democracy. And you can look for our state and go down to Ohio. And then you can sign up for to be a poll chaplain, tell them what city you're in and that you want to be a part of the fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Ben, I knew you were going to be right on it since you already said you were interested. We appreciate you. And if you can get anybody else, and if the other thing is to spread the word, because the more we stick together and good people do the right thing, the less likely we are to have any major problems. We haven't had a lot of situations like Georgia is a different story. Unfortunately, Georgia and Arizona, on top of the challenges that they face, they also face legislation that is really going to limit what people can do. Like they actually passed a law in Georgia that you cannot give people waiting in long lines at the Board of Elections water or food. I don't know how it's a sin to give someone water when they're standing in line. It's, some of our pastors say, that doesn't, these people have never read Mark 25, because they just don't understand. But
I think it's a potential to exchange water for votes.
Yeah, but even if just let
it's silly, but that's probably what they think. That if I give you a bottle of water, I can also ask you to vote for my person. So
yeah. But from what I understand, they are trying to resolve that by putting up stations where there's going to be water there, so a person can
help themselves.
But when you're talking about being in line for 6 to 8 hours, it's unreasonable to think that someone would not be thirsty or not be hungry.
That's right.
That's just not reasonable. But again, we do have the poll chaplain training manual. So the responsibilities, the early voting by state, which again, we know begins October the 12th here. It runs to election day. The last week of voting is the longer hours. You vote from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then that weekend, we have Saturday voting all day, 8 to 4, Sunday, 1 to 5, and then Monday, right before election day, 8 to 2, and then all day on election day. Okay. I think that should be it, right? Mm-hmm. This is what is a poll chaplain. We've been through this. And again, if there are problems that people don't understand, we ask that they call the hotline, the election protection lawyers, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. That's 1-687-8683. There are lawyers there that they staff it all the time. They're very, very helpful. They can help you de-escalate a situation, or if it's very serious, they can tell you what steps you need to take, or maybe even call the authorities. Okay. And the poll chaplains will be outside the sites. We will be giving people large red poll chaplain ID badges, okay? And this will be in connection with the Secretary of State and the boards of elections, so they will know that we'll have people in X county and we'll have people in, X amount of sites. So we will let them know in advance. And we did meet with the Secretary of State. When was that, Dr. McIntosh? The end of January?
End of June.
End of June. I'm sorry.
End of June. Yeah. It's like June 26th or something like that. Yeah. Because I was in Cincinnati when y'all had that meeting.
Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose.
Yeah.
We asked him some honest questions. He gave us some answers. He did say that he would be willing to work with us. In my experience with the Secretary of State has been that kind of thing, he is pretty good at working with you. Now, he is a politician as elected official, and the bottom line is he's going to vote the way his party tells him to vote. But as far as doing his job and working with people, he's been pretty good. Yes. Yeah, they were supposed to block access, Dr. Sullivan. We didn't see a lot of that in Ohio. I mean, there were some instances. Most of that was like blocking entrances to polling locations, like they literally tried to block a driveway in Cleveland. We had things like that happen. It wasn't so much to intimidating individual voters. And I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but it was that kind of activity.
The only experience I know of was in Toledo area, and it wasn't what it was made out to be. Because as poll workers are told that we have to ask people who show up wearing partisan and political clothing,
Right.
that they must somehow shield them or cover them. And somebody had on a hat, and the person at the door just asked the person to either remove the hat and just hold it in their hand when they came in to vote. And they reported to someone who was a state rep that they were not allowed in to vote, which they were. But I was the location supervisor, and nobody ever brought it to me. I got a call from my local board of election telling me this happened. And when I investigated, I was told, no, we told everybody, please, if you have a hat on, please hide the hat, or turn your shirt inside out or cover it up with a jacket. They said that's what we did. We didn't tell anybody they could not come into the building. All right, Bob's got his hand raised. Bob, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm a former poll worker, now retired, and you answered most of the questions already about whether they would be inside or outside of the building. But if a situation where a voter is being prevented from voting inside the building and the clergy person is outside the building, can they help at all?
Yeah, this question actually came up during our last meeting. Someone brought this up, said, okay, if it happens inside and the clergy is outside, what are we going to do? So the attorneys are looking at that to see, one, if the Secretary of State will allow observers inside. Now, I do know that the political parties allow observers inside, because I've been a precinct committee person and an officer of one of the parties, and I have been sent certificates like every major election cycle saying, this person is an observer. So I can go in and watch. But so we will see if we can have a situation like that. Maybe we can get the Secretary of State to allow that. But that is we're actually looking into that right now. Our attorneys are. And the attorneys that we work with are the lawyers for Civil Rights Committee. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Ready for the next slide?
Yeah, and I know Dr. McIntosh already said, but we are asking that clergy wear their collars.
Yes.
I'm ready for the next one.
All right.
Okay. And then this just goes into the definition of the terms of poll activist. The poll worker is a person who actually works for the Board of Election and based on the jurisdiction will be identified as members of a political party. In Ohio, it has to be an equal amount. So one Republican to one Democrat. It's always supposed to be equal. And those people work inside, and their job is to make sure that voting actually takes place in a proper and orderly manner. The monitor is a volunteer who has to be 150 feet outside a polling place, just making sure that everyone who walks in or out has the resources that they need. And the poll watcher, challenger, are the people that we're asking for. Each candidate is entitled to poll watch whose applications be approved in advance by local supervisors or election officials. Poll watchers are referred to as observers. So that's what we're asking for. We're asking for observers. But
And the key to that, the watchers can't talk to voters.
No, they can't.
If they do have a challenge, they have to take it to a poll worker
Right.
to handle. Yes.
Right. Right.
Oops, I missed a page there. Back. No, I won't. Let's see what happens if I go back a page. Oh, it's not gonna work. All right.
That's okay. But
Yeah.
so voter registration deadline, this is Georgia, but we know Ohio, it's voter registration deadline is October 11th. Early voting starts on the 12th. Absentee mail-in request deadline is 3 days before election day, which is probably going to be addressed in the next General Assembly. So Saturday before election day, Saturday at noon, that request has to be into the Board of Elections for an absentee ballot. And then you have to just hope and pray that that person gets their ballot by Tuesday.
Mm.
Process for poll chaplains to follow, recruit, train, the selection, report, serve, understand, check out. Again, if you go to turnoutsunday.com, I know a couple of you have. Anybody who's watching live via Facebook, or as you share this with your organization members or churches, they go to turnoutsunday.com and sign up. And again, that training is going to be every Tuesday in October. Okay. Basic training topics that are going to be covered: state election basic information. We've talked about recruitment, poll site. A lot of this we already talked about. Assignment and employment, time commitment. Again, the shifts, election day operations, data and collection. What kind of information they're asking that the poll chaplains keep, because there may be some information that you want to keep to share with folks. Key contact numbers. And there will be de-escalation training, how to recognize the warning signs of someone on a path to violence. Well, that ought to be interesting. How to assess if the situation is escalating and ways to de-escalate through purposeful verbal communications, body language. This is another reason why we're asking for faith leaders, because faith leaders are normally better at this than most other people. I mean, there's just just as a matter of your training and your calling, there's a way of learning how to calm people down and get them to listen and get them to explain calmly, and so you can listen and try to address the situation. And in many cases, people don't respond violently to clergy. Some do, but most they do have some respect for the caller. So, okay. Next slide, please. Again, calm yourself, listen and acknowledge, respond after acknowledgement. If there's further treatment or harassment or violence, you offer suggestions, assess, trust your instincts. Again, I mean, clergy, as you all are extremely good at this, because it just comes with the territory. And if the situation is not working and there's no way that you can calm this person down, particularly if it's someone that is trying to intimidate, and they try to engage you and they're trying to stop people from voting, or they're harassing people or asking people when they come in, do you have your ID? I need to see your ID. Do you live in this area? How do we know you live? Well, that's not up to them. That happens inside the polling location. They need to just show the poll worker, here's my information, here's my identification. They don't need to have a conversation with someone on the outside. So that's the kind of thing that we think may take place as well. But again, if it gets really crazy, then of course you need to get help or call the authorities. Next slide. And again, the links on turnoutsunday.com. You can also get the full toolkit on there. There's also the conversation that we have with the Ohio Secretary of State is on the website. And so you can go to it and watch it. It's been uploaded to YouTube. Please feel free to look at that and watch it and listen to what Secretary LaRose had to say when we asked him some questions, not just about, we asked him questions about voting, and we asked him questions about protecting voters, but we also asked him some questions about himself. We asked him some questions about fair districts and about the legislative maps not being drawn. And we asked him a question about why he voted for those districts that had been thrown out by the Supreme Court. You know, so we did have a conversation about those things with him as well. So next slide. Selection, again, you know, we already told you what areas we're going to be looking at, and we will not be limiting our activity to the 3 C's. So, next slide. Questions regarding the responsibility of state leads and their staff. So there's a series of questions that we need to ask, and we will do that. So that's really not anything that we need to talk about here. Next slide. Same thing, next slide. Oh, and COVID protocols that we did want to bring up. So I know that many churches, I know my church, we still have COVID protocols in place. We're not 6 feet apart, we're 3 feet, but we are still wearing masks, and people are still taking their temperature when they come in the door. You can just take it yourself by putting your wrist up to the thermometer, but whatever COVID protocols are in place in our state, if you feel comfortable wearing your mask, please do so. All this is things that we already talked about. Again, things that can be answered. We ask you to call Lawyers and Cause Virtual State Command Center, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And then there's a QR code here to download you can download the Skinner Leadership mobile app, and it will allow the chaplains to receive messages from state leads. So we're going to be on the app, and we'll be communicating via the app. Next slide. After all of this is over with, we hope to be able to collect the data, report, and then have kind of a debriefing meeting and evaluate, you know, what worked, what didn't, where we found problems, and what we can do to improve for the next election. Because 2024, if it's anything like 2020, minus the pandemic, I'm hoping and praying that, you know, we don't get hit with another massive epidemic or any more plagues, then, you know, who knows what that could be. You know, almost, what was it, 160 million people voted. So we could be quite busy. But again, we want to be able to evaluate, to look at what happened and try to figure out a way to make it better, or to, if we need to address those issues, maybe with the elections chiefs, the secretaries of state, or with the legislature, then we want to make sure that we do that. And the major effort will be social media efforts. And then the Young Senior Pastor Program activities. So if you have young senior pastors, we really want to make sure that we get them engaged in this process. And actually, we want them to be a partner and to join the state leads programs. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Next slide. These are all about the appendices. Okay. And this is just giving an example, examples of intimidation tactics, following voters, standing behind them, taking notes, you know, visibly carrying a firearm, violent behavior inside or outside a polling location, confronting voters, again, asking them about their ID or where do they live and are you a citizen, and all of that insane behavior are things that we definitely want to make sure is not happening. Next slide. And then this is the table of early voting by state. So, and those votes, the Ohio, you see the list is there. I think most of us are familiar with it, but we can vote early through the day before election day. Next slide. Next slide, this is data. These are all the states' information, so. And if you notice, the states that we're focusing on are Alabama, Arizona, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, what else? Georgia, definitely Georgia.
Texas, Wisconsin,
Texas, okay.
North Carolina.
Wisconsin. And these are also either what are considered swing states or states that have had a lot of changes to the way that folks have voted. You know, even some of the states who have consistently voted, like Alabama, you know, consistently votes, you know, towards the red. So you would think that that shouldn't even be an issue, but it is. It is. Next slide. Next slide. Texas, PA, Wisconsin. Yep. Okay.
Bob had his hand up again.
Yes.
Yeah. My initial question was, will there be outreach to law enforcement officers so that if they walk up to a polling location where there's some disturbance going on and they see somebody wearing clerical clothing, they'll understand the role that they're playing. And
Yes.
now I'm wondering if maybe the Board of Elections is where to call rather than the police.
I think in some situations where they might be both. Because anytime, I'll be honest with you, anytime I've had any issues at a polling location, I've always contacted the Board of Elections, you know. And now if we need to call the police as well, that's fine. But I always contact both. Whether it's behavior of, you know, well, I don't call the police about voting machines, but if it's anything having to do with human behavior, always, because they do need to know that. I mean, that's their job.
Does the board dispatch police at that time?
Sometimes they do. I have seen them do that. You know, particularly if we say that, you know, someone is here and they're really intimidating voters and they've got a weapon, and they may say, you know, are the sheriffs there? You know, because most of the case they will contact the deputy sheriffs because it's a county agency. Are the sheriffs there? Are the police there? No. Okay, so we'll call them, or do you know? Or they'll ask, do you want us to call them, or you want to call them?
And usually it's the location supervisor who makes that call.
Then they normally, like, if we contact, if there's been a problem inside the polling location, what a supervisor say?
Mm-hmm.
Then we contact the Board of Elections. They're going to always contact the supervisor and say what's going on in there.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing they do. And then if for some reason or other there's an issue, most of the time what's happened here is someone from the Board of Elections, senior staff will come to that location to assess the situation themselves. And in several, if it's behavior, I've almost always seen them bring a deputy sheriff with them. If it's machine or something else, then they just, you know, they come with a tech person, but.
That's the rover who does that.
Right.
All righty, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Gelada?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you
Well,
all.
thank you, and we thank you, and you know that we have secured Dr. Skinner to be, Dr. William Skinner, I want to be correct, to be our keynote speaker
Oh,
on November the 2nd for our annual assembly.
okay.
So we'll hear more about a lot of this from her.
Absolutely.
But we wanted to, at least because of the need of pole chaplains, we wanted to afford this opportunity for our faith leaders and faith community to know what we're doing and to get their help and assistance in making sure that our elections are safe.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad. And she's a great speaker anyway. So
Yes, she is. She is. She most certainly is.
yes, yes. But thank you so much. I appreciate everything and being able to share with you all. And Dr. Mack, I appreciate you. So.
Yes, yes, yes. Appreciate you too. Anybody else have anything? Dr. Sullivan, you want to address what's going on Monday?
Well, before I do that, the first thing I want to say is that I'm appreciative of this presentation immensely. And the council has a history of working to protect voting rights. And so I'm very happy that we are reestablishing ourselves at this particular moment to be another partner in this movement. And so I'm very grateful for this topic and the presentation. Thank you so very much. And then on Monday, we will have a presentation concerning ways that we may support the Immokalee workers in their ongoing quest for justice as farm workers in the United States, particularly those who provide goods, vegetables to fast food restaurants like Wendy's. And we have been asked as a council to support the ongoing boycott against Wendy's, and we're going to understand more clearly why that's important this coming Monday at 3:30 p.m. During the Ohio Council of Churches Zoom. So Monday, October 3rd, join us to learn more about the struggle of the Immokalee workers, the struggle for justice as people who work on farms across the country seeking justice for their work. Monday at 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Thank you very much.
And who's presenting that?
Good question.
Somebody you know?
Well, it so happens that my wife, who is the Minister of Economic Justice for the United Church of Christ, is leading a presentation next Monday. So please join us for more than one reason. Please join us.
That's right. We will make sure you stay out the doghouse, especially since you're home with her right now.
That's right.
That's right. Yes.
That's right.
All righty. Brother Ben, what's going on with Love Boldly?
Thank you. We have two exciting webinars coming up on October the 5th. Hold on, checking my calendar. Yes, on October 5th, we will be hosting a webinar with Siobhan Boyd Nelson and Zach Boyer. Zach is the Director of Programs for Stonewall Columbus, and Siobhan is the Deputy Director for Quality Ohio. They will be doing a panel discussion with me on queer people of faith in Christianity. And then on October the 17th, which is Monday, we will be joined by Kristen Komanecki from Christians for Social Action, talking about, discussing dialoguing across differences in our faith communities. So we're very excited about both of those opportunities. They are both free, open to anyone in public. Both are virtual, and there's more information about both on our website.
All right.
And I will drop our website in the chat for anyone who's curious.
All right. We thank you.
Thank you.
And also, our days for our mental health Mondays have ended, but we will be going back to having two faith leaders calls on the 2nd and 4th Mondays. And on the 2nd Monday, which happens to be Indigenous Peoples Day, we will also be dealing with issues surrounding the death penalty again, especially those who have been exonerated after spending time on death row. So that is our planned conversation for the 11th of October. And so we invite you and you and you to come back and join us again. Bob is our regular attendee. We're just so glad for him, for his work and partnership and support of the Ohio Council of Churches. Bob tells us that his mother had been one of the first women to be named as a conference minister.
She was the first female moderator.
Okay.
Central Southeast Ohio Association of what at the time was the Ohio Conference, now called the Heartland Conference of the
Yes, which is United Church of Christ.
First female moderator in about 1980.
So Bob's had long ecumenical and interfaith history. That's our time for today. Brother Ben, I'm going to ask if you would close us out in our prayer today.
Before you do that, let me just clarify that Death Penalty Abolition Zoom was actually October the 10th.
Yeah. And I think I said the 11th, but it's the 10th. Okay, that's right.
Mariah, did you call me?
Yes. Close us out in prayer.
Sure. Gracious God, we come together to first thank you for this time together, for this time of learning about how we can guard our elections and the electoral process this November, how we can learn from each other, and how we can learn from you. Bless each of us in our daily work and in our lives, reminding us that you created each of us for a purpose and to find that which is genuine, that which is good, that which is loving in each other. I ask you to bless the Ohio Council for Churches and all of our respective churches and organizations. Bless our members, bless the people we agree with, and we'd love to work with, and Lord, bless those who sometimes we struggle to work with, reminding us that we are to love our enemies as ourselves. And Lord, I ask this all in your Son's most holy name. Amen.
Amen. Peace.
Amen. Jalata, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We will see you again next week.
Fly safely, Mariah.
Yes. Yeah, fly safely. Well, the sun is still out, so that means that thunderstorm may delay a little bit. So I want to be on that. I want that plane to leave here at 6:30.
On
time. That's right. If it leaves